Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the Spring Classics campaigns of Wout van Aert and Mathieu van der Poel, and with me here to that is Issam.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Considering that the list of topics we wanted to cover was rapidly piling up, we've decided to record a shorter podcast episode today. As said, we'll focus on the spring campaigns, the classics of Van Aert and Van der Poel, the two main protagonists of the cyclocross men's season this year. We'll come to Puk Pieterse and a number of other topics, Thibaut Nys for instance, in our next podcast. We'll record that one after Liège-Bastogne-Liège, but considering we also want to cover the future of Charles Legois and the Wanty teams in that, it would be probably an hour and a half if we shoved everything together, so that's why we're splitting it, roughly 30 minutes today and then probably 45 to an hour next week. So Issam, let's get into it. Wout van Aert, first rider we should cover, I think. He raced the longest. He concluded his season on Sunday. We're recording this on Tuesday night. Fourth place in Amstel Gold Race was the final result of his spring season. He's going to be racing the Giro soon. How do you reflect upon his spring classic season? He started quite soon after the Cyclocross Worlds with a number of races that weren't that important. Classica Jeanne, then the Algarve, opening weekend, but his real emphasis was on the Spring Classics, second in Dwars door Vlaanderen, fourth in the Tour of Flanders, fourth in Paris-Roubaix, second place in Brabantse Pijl, and then fourth in Amstel Gold this weekend. What's your take on that?
I think that if you look at those results, it's not that bad, right? But I think that it's the way he somewhat attracted some attention with different approach, the way he tried to prepare himself for the Spring Classics. And I think that a lot of people just put a lot of emphasis on that there was just a difference in approach. And I think that's, looking back, a lot of people are pointing towards that for him not being able to, mainly Paris-Roubaix, I think, not being able to be at his best, or at least it didn't seem like that. And I think that it was a bit of a weird couple of races that we have seen from him, because we have seen him at times being very strong. A race that is less importance, I guess, but the Brabantse Pijl, he was the first two local laps, he looked quite strong. But on the last one, it was just not really there. It was he was kind of getting empty. You could see it on his facial expressions. It was just not really there. And I think that race somewhat summed it up. It was, he was good and his base was good, but it was just, he didn't have enough to challenge for the win or for a podium or really being up there. And I think looking back, it's just, there were a lot of painful moments. He should not really panic, because I think there were a lot of positives, but he should really ask himself if the preparation and the way he prepared himself and his potential overall, if it's still up there and if there are things that have to be changed. I think you cannot do the races with the expectations that he has and come with these results and then not change anything and do the same thing next year. I think that some questions have to be asked and he has to be very honest towards himself. There is a Giro coming. We should not forget that he the crashes that he had, and it seemed like in the Vuelta that he was really getting better, and then he had that crash there again, and it has been a very tough ride for him. It's a bit of a shame that he wasn't able to, in the race which I thought would suit him the best, Paris-Roubaix, he wasn't able to somewhat show us what we thought would be a very good race, because we saw him in Tour of Flanders, which doesn't suit him that well. He was actually able to do quite well, and he was able to be there for the fight for the podium, which a lot of people, when we saw him race in the Ederi Saxo Classic, thought was impossible. So it's very difficult to place his Spring Classic campaign, but I just hope that he doesn't really, panic, and he's not really that type of guy that would do so. I think that he just has to try and regroup and find the answers and come back stronger.
Lots of points in what you said there, and I think you're right to conclude that on face value, the Spring Classics campaign he delivered was not bad at all. After the E3 race, which was a massive disappointment for him. He finished second or fourth in all the races he did. Of course, it's not the classic season that he hoped for, and I think part of that, and we'll cover a few other things that you mentioned, but the pressure and expectation pattern you create when you skip a number of races, and mainly Milan-San Remo, a monument. Yes, he's won it once, but it's also the only monument that Van Aert has won. Skipping that, not racing Tirreno, not racing Strade, and of course the new reformed course here in Strade doesn't really suit classics riders anymore. It's more of a climber's race. But I think that skipping Sanremo really sets a precedent. It creates this expectation and pressure for, okay, you're willing to give up one of the most important races on the calendar. When Van der Poel won that race, he said, my spring was already a success. Skipping a race like that, in order to be at your best to win the Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix, it sets a degree of pressure. It sets a degree of expectations. And I would argue that these results don't really justify skipping a race of that caliber. I get that winning those two races, the Holy Week, that is really, really what Van Aert wants, and that is something that for him would feel like completes his career. But at the same time, this year Milan-San Remo was ridden differently than in usual years. Pogačar went on the Cipressa. We had that duo attack with Van der Poel, which we covered in an earlier episode. But I would still argue that is a race where if you're not the strongest rider, you have the best opportunities, the best chances of winning that race because of the large number of scenarios that played out there. Ganna was able to follow. I don't know, a good Van Aert could potentially have followed there as well. That he struggled in the Tour of Flanders a bit on the steepest climbs, different types of climbs, they're a different ball game. I would argue that is something that plays in here as well, right? When you skip a race that you could potentially win, a race that's important to almost everybody in the peloton, then people are going to be like, yeah, bit disappointing. Whereas if you had raced Strade or Sanremo and Tirreno or Paris-Nice and done a bunch of those races, then people would have probably looked at this in a different context and come up with some different conclusions.
Yeah, absolutely. And they would have been much more fair, I guess, to the results. Because again, it's not that it is super terrible what he has been performing like, but it's just, I think just the focus and a race like the Tour of Flanders is just, people look at that and that's then one of those races that you do and you just have that different approach towards that spring classic, and it makes it even worse because it was, for sure, it was a tactical blunder in a way and it shouldn't have happened, but the way it was blown up and it was like, oh, is this going to affect his Tour of Flanders and all that, I think was a bit excessive, but understandable on the other hand, because he was skipping races like Milan-San Remo, which, I think that if Ganna was able to follow, I think that Van Aert also in good form should have been able to be there. I shouldn't be speculating too much on that, but I feel that is normally a race that it's an opportunity. He is one of the favorites if he starts and if he's in good form. So again, I think that he really needs to ask the right questions, because I think there were a couple of things that didn't go right apart from his form. His positioning wasn't great. His passage through Edarenberg was also not amazing. He said that he didn't really feel well, but he was giving positions maybe a little bit too easy. Yeah, I don't know what there are just a couple of things that, apart from only his form, that didn't go his way. And then a lot of people were speculating on his sprint and that maybe his training affected his sprint. But then you see in a bunch sprint in Amstel Gold, he was able to finish fourth. So, conclusions that maybe a bit too far-fetched. I think that it was just basically was cooked in all the sprints at that point, and he was just not really able to deliver a sprint that he normally should win. And I think that can happen. He should just ask the right questions. That is it, and prepare maybe a different way. Maybe change the way of racing. It could be a couple of things. And if he finds the answers, I guess. He should be able to be at the top again in the next coming years. And if that is going to be enough to beat Van der Poel and to beat Pogacar and Pedersen and who else is going to be showing up in those years, I don't know. We have to wait and see. But I feel that this year he just didn't... It felt like he didn't reach his potential, and he wasn't able to really get that ultimate form that he so much wanted from this different way of preparing himself for the Spring Classics.
So about those sprints that you mentioned, I think the loss against Paulus was obviously embarrassing in Dwars door Vlaanderen, but losing against Pedersen on the Velodrome of Roubaix is no shame. Losing against Pedersen and Van der Poel in the Tour of Flanders is also no shame. He nearly beat Van der Poel there, so I don't really see those losses as problematic. They just kind of all got thrown on one bunch after he lost to Evenepoel in the Brabantse Pijl. And I think you're right to allude to the fact that he was cooked in that race, because you could see, and you mentioned it earlier, that he was quite active in the 2 laps, and he placed an attack on the Moskestraat earlier where he put Evenepoel under pressure, but then he was on the road with Evenepoel. Sitting in the wheel of Evenepoel is pretty much like eating the wind, because the dude is so tiny and so aero that you don't really get the draft benefit. And sure, I would still have expected the best Van Aert to win that stage or that race, but it's adding to that the reason that he doesn't really have the energy at the end of the race. And I know they're looking into the shorter cranks he's using, but I think above everything, you earlier mentioned those injuries, but regardless of the recovery that he needed to go through from the Vuelta towards where he is now, was he at 100%? Was he not due to that injury? That's a question mark. But what is clear is that last season's crash in Dwars door Vlaanderen has affected his ability to ride in the peloton. I saw it a number of times this year that he struggled to follow the wheels of his teammates, that there are gaps that he no longer puts his wheel in to move up. He was out of position a number of times also in the Tour of Flanders. I do think that that is down to that crash, and that there's something, not maybe in his head or maybe unconsciously, that's factoring in there, which is affecting his ability to perform at the best of his level at the end of the race, because every effort he needs to do to gain those positions or move up by himself rather than on the wheel of his teammates, those are things that come to bite you at the end of the race, and you can't afford that if you're racing at the highest level. And it's obviously a shame to see that, especially if it is down to that crash last year. And adding to that, at Cyclocross World Championships, the reason that Van Aert gave as to why he started was that he realized after last year's crashes that he doesn't get that many opportunities for the big races, and that he felt if he didn't race the World Championships, where he thought he had a slim chance of winning but was confident that he could finish on the podium, he felt like he would have wasted another opportunity. And I hope that next year we see this same mentality towards the season. Van Aert and Van der Poel are both getting older. They're in their 30s. There's not that many years left. So I would hope that he starts approaching it more broadly and doesn't specialize and hyper-focus on a few of these races, but rather races more, and hopefully he'll be allowed to race more freely as well. I have 2 more things here to cover about Van Aert. Before we come to the Giro, Issam, he's obviously being compared to Van der Poel a lot. And I wonder how you look towards that, because a few seasons ago they were quite evenly matched in their rivalry. Now there's not really much of a rivalry in terms of who's the most successful rider, right? Van der Poel has far more cyclocross world titles. He has 8 monuments on the road. Van Aert has 1. Sure, Van Aert has more tour stages, but it doesn't really compare to each other anymore. I wonder how you look at that. Has Van der Poel improved? Do we need to conclude that there are different types of riders? What's your take?
I definitely think that we can say that Van der Poel has improved over the years. And I think that he has spoken about that as well, that his preparation and his approach towards races has drastically changed. I think you can see it as well within his team, that you see the changes being made and they are getting more and more professional. While I think Van Aert was already in quite a professional environment, which for sure we know that Visma Leasebike is a team that normally really looks into the small margins, but they were already at quite a level when he arrived there. And I think that when they both kind of started on the road, and I definitely thought that Van Aert would have been much closer in terms of wins compared to Van der Poel. And at times I think that there were a lot that would tell you that he was probably going to be better. But I think that Van Aert was also a bit unlucky with a lot of things, the way they went, the injuries, the crashes. That year, I don't know what year it was, but the COVID at Tour of Flanders, I think it was 21, I'm not sure. But it's just, he has been quite unlucky. And it's just, Van der Poel, sure, he also had his issues with his back, but he was always able to just kind of find his way. And I think that is also something that you need to consider when you talk about the growth of a rider. You know, the amount of setbacks that a rider had. I think that with Van Aert, it's in a way, I have to say, it's a wonder that he's still able to perform the way he's doing, because there are riders that had less in their careers and were not able to overcome those setbacks whatsoever. And I think in that regard, the mental strength of Van Aert is definitely showing in that regard, but it's just very hard to compare them. I mean, if you see how Van Aert was racing in the Tour de France as a domestique, and is, I think we have to conclude that just Van der Poel was able, you know, he was always that talent, he was always quite special. Van Aert was always the one that was just behind him somewhat. That in a way, that is now how it is at the moment. It is Van der Poel that is winning the races, it's Van der Poel that is setting the records and being up there, and it is Van Aert that is, you know, that guy that is just there around, and he is racing quite well, but it's just not really there yet. And I think we shouldn't be too critical of Van Aert's career, because I think he has done many great things, but it's just those, the wins that we normally thought would have been able for him are not there yet. Paris-Roubaix should have been there. You know, it was going to be a difficult one, but, you know, the puncture there as well 2 years ago, it's just, luck has to be on your side. And at the moment, it seems that for Van Aert, that hasn't been the case. And it's tough to see in a way. But and I hope that he just is able to keep on pushing, be motivated, believe in the process. It's a big cliche, but I think that for him, it should definitely be something that he should be holding on to, and we have to wait and see. But it's, at the moment, it's quite clear where Van der Poel is and where Van Aert is. But there's one thing that I would say that is something that will never change, I guess, is when you mention Van der Poel, you will always talk about Van Aert, and the other way around. And I think that is, no matter what the results are, that's never going to change.
Paris-Roubaix has been a race where Van Aert has indeed been very unlucky. You mentioned that puncture on Carrefour de l'Arbre, but he's had other editions before where things clearly didn't go his way either. But the COVID Tour of Flanders, which was 2020, that was really his own mistake. He should have launched that sprint much earlier than he did. Two things I would like to add are that, first of all, Van Aert took road racing more seriously earlier. Not only did he start doing road racing for the big classics one season earlier than Van der Poel, who started in 2019, Van Aert had raced on the road before earlier as well, shown his potential by winning that prologue in the Baloise Belgium Tour, beating Tony Martin. But he also made the transfer to a bigger team earlier. He made that move to Jumbo and improved from it, whereas Van der Poel within Alpecin has slowly progressed. That team has grown with him. You could really see that in COVID, Alpecin was not at the level of Jumbo-Visma, what the team was called back then. They didn't have a training camp. Van der Poel trained in Belgium on the flats. Van Aert was at altitude. He came in much, much better form. Van der Poel needed that entire season to come into form towards the end. Only by Bing Bang Tour Liège and then Tour of Flanders did he really reach form. And since that point, when Van der Poel has had many ups and downs, only after that big incident at the 2022 World Championships in Wollongong did Van der Poel really, really step up his game and put everything on his road racing career to win what he now has, 8 monuments. Secondly, I do think there are different types of riders. Van Aert is the ultimate all-rounder. That's why he's so good suited to the Tour, whereas Van der Poel is a more pure classics rider. Those were the two things I wanted to add. And then, Van Aert is going to the Giro now. What do you expect from him there? We saw last year that the Tour, he wasn't at 100% yet. He had, of course, that big crash in spring. He recovered, he did some domestique work there. We saw him a bit, but not in his usual Tour de France style. But we saw when he got free rein in the Vuelta, when he improved his form, he was really on fire. It's a shame that crash happened because he had already won a bunch of stages. I'm sure he could have won a few more. He would have almost certainly won the green jersey. There was a good opportunity that he would have won the KOM jersey as well. What do you expect in the Giro? Because that lineup for Visma is quite interesting. If you look at it, they bring sprinter Olaf Koy. He's been said to do leadouts, but they're also bringing a mountain train for Simon Yates, who's going to be their leader, which includes Kelderman, Van Baarle, Kruiswijk. What do you think he's going to do? Free rein, some stage hunting, or will it be domestique duties? Is he going to race the full Giro?
Racing the full Giro is going to be hard to say. You know, I'm not pointing on any crashes or anything. God forbid, to be honest.
No, but I meant early abandon because he's going
to
do
I
the
know,
Tour.
I know. But it's I think that he should be able to get his. I think that he's probably going to eye a couple of stages. He will definitely have to help Koy because Koy doesn't really have that much support. Depends on what the agreements are for that Giro. I mean, is it going to be that he has to make sure that Koy isn't at the front in the last 3 kilometers, or does he actually have to do his lead out in the sense of really sprinting him out? That's also going to take some effort, and then I don't know how that will be in terms of really going for a stage. It's difficult, the Giro. I've seen Van der Poel that it is at times quite difficult, and with his abilities to get another stage win. So I feel that for Van Aert it's going to be similar. It's not going to be that easy as it was in the Vuelta. Vuelta is a different race. I think it's a race that suits him a little bit more than something like a Giro. But we have to wait and see, and I feel, to be honest, that for him the goal should be going into the Giro d'Italia. That's just going to be get better form, get more confidence in the peloton, try to improve. That's mainly it, and help the team, obviously. And from there on, he should look what is possible in the Tour de France. I think that is... I'm not going to say that could save his season, but I think that he can do beautiful things, and we have seen that if Van Aert is very good in the Tour de France, sure, it's a bit difficult because you have Jonas Vingegaard who wants to win the yellow jersey, but he will potentially still get the freedom to do what he wants, I guess, to an extent, and we probably will enjoy him in the Tour de France. So hopefully he can show himself in his best form, and that would only be, that would be good for him and his confidence, and it would be great to see him in the Tour de France in great form. So hopefully that is going to be possible, and hopefully the Giro d'Italia will enable him to be in good form in the Tour de France.
Then Mathieu van der Poel. Since we last recorded, he won Paris-Roubaix. I really don't think we need to spend too much time talking about that. We praised him already in our 2 previous road podcasts. It was a race full of anticlimaxes. The Pedersen puncture was ultimately decided because Pogačar crashed. It was an impressive ride by Van der Poel nonetheless, but I think we should more focus on what he's going to be doing, because he is supposed to be racing mountain bikes. He is said to make his return to mountain biking in Germany. He would be racing in Heubach, and then it's said that he would race the World Cup in Novo Mesto a week later. I have some struggles to really see what he is going to be doing on the mountain bike. He's been out for so long. He made that half attempt at the World Championships when he crashed in the first corner. He had that short stint leading up to the Tokyo Olympics, but he had back issues in Alpstad. He got beaten by Pidcock in Nove Mesto, and then, of course, the crash there. The last time he really took on several mountain bike races was in 2019. And even if you want to take in 2021 with Alpstad and Nove Mesto, because it's somewhat comparable to what he's going to be doing now, it's likely going to be these two races, then going to go to the Tour, and then try and build towards those World Championships. But I don't know how many World Cup opportunities there are before. It's World Series now, but not that many. Let's put it that way. And mountain bike since has become a different sport, because while Pidcock is there and he raced against him, if you look, the names up front are different now. Sink isn't who he used to be. He's not the front runner anymore. Schurter is still there, but it's not the same Schurter anymore. The new names, and those were the ones up front last year, were Hatherley, Koretsky, and Pidcock. Pidcock won't be racing those first races. It's good that he races there in Germany. I have no idea what the level of the start field is going to be, but he needs those points. And in that World Cup in Nove Mesto, he will be up against the best riders in the world. I don't really attach too much value to these Brazilian races. They are nice, they are fun, but it's early season. Several riders didn't make the trip. But what you do see is that the riders up front are different now. I'm not really going to mention Blevins in this, because we know that he's an early season specialist, and while he can do good on some races, he's mainly very good on the short track. If you look at the names coming through, you see Vidaure, he is very young. You see Boisy, he is also very young, U23 even, still a final year. Luke Moore has been making some progression for South Africa. Then there's a lot of different riders up front compared to when Van der Poel last really raced mountain bikes. So I think it will be interesting to see what he can do. I think he certainly should have the level to think about a top 10. I think we can expect that, but it's hard. It's really hard to guess, because it's very difficult to return from such a long break.
Yeah, I think that is mainly it. I think it is. He has been off a mountain bike for a bit too long, or at least it hasn't been his focus. I don't know if he has been on a mountain bike or not, but it has been for way too long out of his focus, and it's just, when you try to get back in it, it's just going to be very difficult. But I think that if you look at his potential, it should normally be possible to be at least within the top 10. And I think the first race is going to show us, not the race in Germany, but the first World Cup, I would say, is going to tell us the full story. You know, for sure, it's going to improve from that race onwards, but it will tell us a lot, because if he's going to be training there somewhere in P30, we know what time it is. At that point, it's just, we kind of know that his chances for a rainbow jersey are going to be slim to none. But if he's able to be up there in his first race within the top 5 or top 10 even, I think at that point there is something to build from. For sure, I think Pidcock won't be there because he's going to be in the Giro, but that doesn't really matter in the eyes of Van der Poel, I would say. For him, it's going to be key to get those points and be up there as far as possible in the front. And, mountain bike has definitely changed, but Van der Poel has improved on the road, which doesn't mean that he in the mountain bike is going to be also much better than he was. Actually, the opposite, most likely. But we have to wait and see. He's super talented. We sometimes have been, in cyclocross, asking some questions about how he will be returning and all that. And then we see the first race and we kind of know that he's very special. And I'm not saying that's going to be the same in mountain bike, because it's a completely different discipline. But we should not completely underestimate him, because the talent alone should be able to be somewhat in the mix, maybe 20th or somewhere around that range. It's just very hard to tell. And as I said, I think that first race, the first World Cup, will tell us the full story of how the season will roughly go.
It's worth mentioning that his starting position isn't going to be ideal for these races, so that he can improve throughout the season. It's difficult when you combine that many disciplines, and especially the combination road mountain biking is really tough. You even see it with Pidcock when he does the tour and then returns to the mountain bike after. It's not always as great, and of course it's worked out just fine for him, but he's really stayed in that rhythm. And we've seen for Van der Poel that, for instance, especially probably at that Glasgow World Championships, that being off definitely took a toll because he crashed in the easiest corner of the course right there. That's not ideal to say the least. He's probably going to start taking it more serious because he wants to race on the mountain bike in the LA Olympics. But it's still going to be something that requires time and effort. If he really wants to make that a success, you will need to do, I think, more than 3 or 4 mountain bike races in a season. Of course, this year he can, and I also think he should, extend this season beyond the Mountain Bike World Championships. He should complete the season. He should do the races in the US and Canada, get the feel for it, get some points under his belt, and then from there on start building and consider how he's going to approach all the rest. He said that he preferred to not race the Tour this year and then only do mountain bike events. Clearly that was not an option for his team. I think there are some good opportunities for him to win stages in the Tour this year, but they will need to decide what approach to take towards those LA Olympics. They need to decide, is mountain bike going to be it? Van der Poel wants an Olympic medal, and he sees the mountain bike as a realistic option. But what do they do when the course there in LA turns out to be a bit hilly? Because in Paris, they went off the assumption that the road race course would be pan flat, a criterium on the Champs-Élysées. But they went into Montmartre, it became a hilly course. Didn't work out for Van der Poel, but he did have a fighting chance on that course. So that's all questions that will need to be answered by Alpecin in the upcoming years, but I would certainly encourage them, and I don't have any say in this, of course, but if I were a director at Alpecin, I would seriously keep Van der Poel doing a number of mountain bike races. This is a good start. See if you can do 1 race or 2 races before the World Championships after the Tour. Do those post-Worlds races, and then next year try and repeat that so you keep in the cycle, you get some points, you get somewhere, and you get a feeling for the bike. That's, I think, ultimately the most important thing. Good. I think we've covered it all then, Issam, for this episode. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, no worries. It was a pleasure. And we will be back, I don't know when, but in a short time, I guess, and cover quite some topics, I guess, because at that point we have some races to talk about.
Yeah, most definitely. We'll cover the remainder of the Ardennes Classics then. We'll cover Buck Petersen, as said. We'll cover some other riders, and we'll cover the future of Charles Legois' cyclocross team. That will be coming after this weekend. Thanks everyone for listening. See you guys soon. Goodbye.